My name is Irene. At just 25, I managed to do something I was incredibly proud of. I bought my very first home. It took me years of saving, budgeting, and giving up little luxuries to get there. But when the time came to finalize everything, my parents insisted it would be safer to put the house in their name. They said it was only for legal protection. I trusted them. I believed they had my best interests at heart. A year later, that trust shattered. They handed the house over to my brother as a wedding present. I didn't fight. I didn't scream. I just walked away in silence, carrying the weight of betrayal like a stone in my chest. 6 months passed before I saw them again. Calls started coming in, my phone buzzing constantly, my parents urging me to come home for dinner. One Friday evening, after a draining week, I almost ignored my mom's message. We haven't seen you in so long. Come by tonight. Let's eat together. Something in me, habit, duty, or maybe a last shred of hope that family still meant something, made me say yes. The moment I stepped through the door, I sensed it wasn't just dinner. Balloons floated against the ceiling, and a banner stretched across the living room wall. Congratulations, Daniel and Sophia. My brother sat at the table with his fiancée, their fingers laced together, glowing with happiness while my parents hovered nearby, beaming. I froze in the doorway, clutching my purse strap. What's all this? I asked, though a sick feeling was already curling in my stomach. My mom spotted me and smiled like everything was perfectly normal. Irene, just in time. My dad stood, pride radiating off him as he clapped Daniel on the back. We have some wonderful news, he said, glancing at me like I should already know. Daniel leaned back in his chair, smirking. Then the words dropped. We're giving them the house, my dad announced, grinning ear to ear. It was like a punch to the chest. I blinked at him, my voice unsteady. You're what? My mom gave a little laugh, waving her hand as though I'd misheard. Sweetheart, it just makes sense. Daniel and Sophia are starting their life together. They'll need a place of their own. I stared at them, my heart racing. That house wasn't just four walls. It was years of my life. Years of skip vacations, extra shifts, meals of instant noodles, so I could put every spare dollar into that down payment. And now it was being handed away as though my effort had never existed. That's my house, I said firmly, though my throat was tight. My dad sighed, like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Irene, technically it isn't. It's in our name. You know that. I remembered the words they'd said when I signed those papers. It's just for liability. Nothing will change, Irene. It's only paperwork. And I had believed them. Now, that lie stood between me and everything I'd worked for. I paid for it, I whispered, my hand gripping my purse so hard my knuckles ached. Daniel rolled his eyes. Don't be selfish, Irene. My head snapped toward him. Selfish? He was being gifted the very thing I sacrificed for. And somehow I was the selfish one. Sophia tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, smiling sweetly in that insincere way that made my skin crawl. Irene, you're so independent. You'll be fine. You always land on your feet. That was the excuse, wasn't it? That because I was capable, I didn't need help, didn't deserve protection, didn't get to keep what I had earned. Meanwhile, Daniel always needed more. More attention, more money, more second chances. I turned to my parents, desperation and anger colliding in my chest. Do you really think this is fair? My mom gave me a soft, patronizing smile. It's what's best for the family. But she didn't mean our family. She meant his future family, the one he was building while mine was being dismissed. I exhaled slowly, pressing my lips together to stop the words I wanted to scream. I could fight, argue, beg. But what would be the point? The papers weren't in my name. Legally, they had every right to give it away. And clearly, their decision had already been made long before I walked through that door. So, I swallowed down the rage, nodded once, and said nothing. I bit back every word pressing at the edge of my tongue and walked out. No bags, no goodbyes, not even a glance toward my room. I simply turned on my heel, stepped outside, and left everything behind. They could keep it. Let them sink beneath the weight of their own decisions. I knew the day would come when regret would find them. It just hadn't arrived yet. I didn't turn back. I slid into my car, started the engine, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles burned. No tears, no screams, no pleading thoughts of fairness. Because if I let myself dwell on what they had stolen, I might have marched back inside and demanded acknowledgement. But I knew better. They wouldn't care. They never did. So I focused on the road, forcing myself to breathe, forcing myself forward. I had no plan, no map for what came next, but I had survived worse alone, and I could do it again. That night, I found a small rental, a cramped one-bedroom with just enough space to move around. It wasn't much, but it was mine. The following morning, I drained the little savings I had left on the deposit and first month's rent. Just like that, I carved out a corner of the world for myself. Not the house I had saved for, not the dream I had worked toward, but a space no one could take from me. From that point on, I threw everything into work. I volunteered for projects others didn't want, picked up extra shifts, and pushed myself harder than ever. It wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. It was about building something for myself, and slowly it began to pay off. Within 3 months, I earned a promotion, a raise that transformed my life in ways I hadn't imagined. For the first time, money wasn't a constant worry. I wasn't stretching every dollar or covering anyone else's expenses. What I earned was mine, and I was thriving. Meanwhile, my parents and Daniel went quiet. No calls, no texts, no "how are you?" As though I had been erased from their lives. And I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself I was free of them. But little reminders crept in, whether I wanted them or not. A coworker mentioning they had seen my mom looking worn down. A distant cousin messaging me on Facebook about how tense my dad seemed. I brushed it off. They had gotten exactly what they wanted, a perfect setup, a shiny home for Daniel and his new wife. Their dream was intact. Why should I care? Then came the first sign something wasn't right. One night scrolling through social media, I noticed Daniel and Sophia's updates had suddenly stopped. They used to post endlessly, pictures of their new furniture, their happy little home, captions about being blessed. But then nothing. Weeks of silence. Finally, a new photo appeared, Daniel and Sophia sitting in a restaurant, smiling too stiffly, with a caption that chilled me. Crazy how fast things change. No details. Just that. The comments only deepened the unease. Damn, man. Hope everything works out. You guys are strong. You'll bounce back. Bounce back from what? I set my phone down, pulse hammering in my ears. Something had unraveled in their perfect world. But it wasn't my concern. They had made their choices, cut me out, and left me with nothing. They could deal with the fallout themselves. Then the calls began. My mom first, her name flashing across my screen again and again. I let it ring out. Then my dad. Then Daniel. All of them, one after another, trying to reach me. I ignored them all, until a text appeared from Daniel, and that stopped me cold. I know you're angry, but we need to talk. It's important. I read it twice, my fingers hovering over the screen. Daniel was never the one to reach out first. He was always too proud, too entitled to admit when he needed something. Which meant this was different. This was serious. Something fell off, and deep down I knew it. My hand shook as I typed out my reply, why. Minutes dragged by before Daniel finally responded. Just come home, please. I stared at those words. Come home. Like I had a home to go back to. Like they hadn't stripped it from me and handed it over as though my years of sacrifice meant nothing. I didn't answer. But for the first time since I'd walked away, I couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect little setup had cracked. Still, I didn't rush to them. Not after everything. Even with Daniel's text, even when the phone wouldn't stop ringing, even when my mother's soft, pleading voicemails filled with fake sweetness piled up. I stayed silent. For 6 whole months. They had erased me like I didn't exist. And now, suddenly, I was the first person they needed. It wasn't about reconciliation. I knew that instantly. They wanted something, and I wasn't about to give it to them easily. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. After 3 more days of constant pressure, I gave in. Not because I longed to see them, but because I needed to understand just what had gone so wrong. The moment I pulled into the driveway, the answer was already written across the house. The once perfect lawn had grown wild and patchy. Curtains were drawn tight, making the place look hollow, lifeless. And then, plastered across the front door, a bright orange foreclosure notice glared at me like a warning sign. Before I could even gather my thoughts, the door burst open and my mother rushed out. Her appearance nearly startled me. Gone was her polished look. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, dark circles heavy under her eyes like sleep had abandoned her long ago. She gripped my arm as if afraid I'd vanish. "Sweetheart, thank God you're here. We were about to call again." I shook her off. "What's going on?" She faltered, and then my father appeared, rubbing his temples as though carrying the weight of the world. "We need your help," he muttered. I folded my arms tightly. "With what exactly?" My mom exchanged a nervous glance with him before darting her eyes toward Daniel, who now stood in the doorway. He looked irritated, like my presence was some unnecessary complication, like I was the problem. "Someone explain," I demanded. Finally, my mother sighed, wringing her hands. "It's the mortgage, Irene." I stared at her, expression blank. "The bank is threatening foreclosure," she admitted, voice small. "We're behind on payments." The words hung heavy in the air. I let them sink in and then laughed, cold and humorless. I never missed a payment. My dad turned his face away, guilt written across it. I swung my gaze to Daniel. "How far behind are you?" His jaw clenched. "It's not my fault." "Really?" I shot back. "Because last I checked, you were the one living here." His fist tightened, his face reddening. "We just fell behind a little. The bank is overreacting." "How far, Daniel?" I pressed. The silence stretched. At last, my mother cleared her throat. 5 months. My stomach dropped. 5 months. That wasn't a little behind. That was teetering on the edge of losing everything. I drew in a slow breath, connecting the dots. Daniel's gambling. It had always been there, lurking. From small bets on sports to poker nights, and then onto bigger, riskier wagers. I'd known, but I'd also assumed my parents covered for him. Now that the house was in his name, he had burned straight through the safety net. And here they were, desperate, scrambling for me to swoop in. "You need to help us," my mother urged, her tone climbing. I tilted my head, lips curling into a bitter smile. "And why would I do that?" She blinked, taken aback. "Irene, this is your home too." That earned a sharp, hollow laugh from me. "That's funny, because 6 months ago, you told me to find somewhere else to live." My dad exhaled like I was being impossible. "Look, we made a mistake, but the bank is closing in. We just need you. Just need me." I cut him off. The silence that followed was louder than anything they could have said. And they knew it. I wasn't the favorite. I never had been. Daniel was the golden child, the one they'd bent over backwards to excuse. I was the reliable one, the fixer. And now, just like always, they expected me to rescue them. I glanced back at the bright foreclosure notice, orange against the door. If I walked away, the house would be gone in weeks. But this house was supposed to be mine. And maybe this was my chance to make that true again. I turned to Daniel. "How much?" His posture loosened slightly, hope flickering across his face. "A little over 18,000. 18,000. A lot, yes. But with my promotion, my savings, a strict plan, I could manage it. But not for them. Not for free." "I'll pay it," I said at last. My mother gasped, her hands flying together in relief. "Oh, sweetheart, I knew we could count on." "I have conditions," I interrupted. My father's expression darkened. "Irene." I raised a hand, cutting him off. "No, you don't get to argue." The air went still. They waited. For once, it was my turn to set the rules. I kept my voice even, controlled. "If I'm the one covering your debt, then this house belongs to me." My mother blinked, startled. "What?" "You'll sell it to me," I replied firmly. "At a low price, just a fraction of its value." The shock that spread across their faces was almost satisfying. Daniel's jaw tightened, his voice rising with anger. "You're trying to steal my house." I tilted my head slightly, calm as ever. "Your house? You mean the one you couldn't even afford to pay for?" He opened his mouth, but before he could spit out another protest, my father cut in. "Irene, that isn't fair." What's not fair, I snapped, turning my gaze on him, is that I paid for this house and you handed it away like it was a toy. His lips pressed into a thin line. He knew I had them cornered. The truth was inescapable. Without me, they had no way out. The bank was days away from seizing the property, and they had no money, no backup, no miracle in sight. I was their only chance. My mother's face paled. You'd really do this? Yes, I said, holding her eyes. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only when my father let out a long sigh and rubbed his forehead. Fine, he muttered. We'll sign the papers. I gave a small nod, though my heart thudded in my chest. I had won, but I wasn't finished. There was still one last move to play, and when it was done, they'd regret ever stealing this house from me. I didn't allow myself to relax until everything was official. Every signature on every document, every paper notarized, processed, and finalized. No loopholes, no vague promises, no hidden traps. I knew better than to trust them. For years, I had been the one to clean up their messes, to sacrifice, to take responsibility, and they had twisted that against me. Not this time. 2 weeks later, the house was legally mine again. We sat around the same dining table where, not long ago, they told me I needed to move out. The same table where they had given away my hard-earned home to Daniel. I pulled a folded letter from my bag and slid it across the polished wood. Daniel frowned as he picked it up. What's this? Leaning back in my chair, I said coolly, your 1-month eviction notice. The room froze. Daniel gave a short laugh, shaking his head. You're joking. Do I look like I'm joking? I asked steady. He scanned the letter, and his smirk faded with each line. You can't be serious. You said you'd help us. I did help you, I reminded him, smiling faintly. I paid your debt. I stopped the bank from taking this house. But I bought it, Daniel. Which means you don't live here anymore. My mother gasped, snatching the paper. Irene, sweetheart, we never. You never what? I cut in sharply. She stammered. We never meant. What you meant, I said flatly, was that I just let Daniel and Sophia stay forever. For free. Sophia, quiet until now, spoke up, her voice edged with panic. Irene, where are we supposed to go? I raised an eyebrow. I don't know. Maybe your kind in-laws will take you in. Or better yet, I glanced at my parents. Maybe they can open their doors since they thought Daniel deserved this house more than me. My father's face hardened. Irene, this is cruel. No, I said, locking eyes with him. What you did to me was cruel. This is balance. Daniel slammed the letter on the table. You can't do this. I stayed seated, calm. I can, and I already have. My mother's voice wavered. We're family. Families don't treat each other like this. I leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. Families don't rip away the home their daughter worked for and give it to someone else. You don't get to lecture me. Her face fell, and I stood, lifting my bag onto my shoulder. You have 4 weeks to move out, I said. Start packing. Then I walked out. For the next month, they tried everything, pleading, crying, threatening. Daniel sent furious texts, blaming me for ruining his life. Sophia called in tears, saying they had nowhere to go. My parents begged me to reconsider, claiming I was punishing everyone over a misunderstanding. But I didn't respond. Not once. I had already sacrificed enough. On the final day of the eviction notice, I drove back to see if they were gone. The driveway was cluttered with moving boxes. Daniel and Sophia were arguing near their car, her face streaked with tears. My parents were helping them load their things. They had no choice. Daniel and Sophia were moving in with them. I rolled down my window, speaking lightly. All packed up? Daniel spun around, his face flushed with rage. You're a real piece of work. I smiled faintly. And you're a terrible tenant. Guess we both learned something today. My mother's eyes pleaded with me. Irene, please don't do this. I looked at her evenly. You told me to find another place, remember? She inhaled sharply, but I didn't soften. I parked the car, stepped out, and walked to the porch that was mine again. You made your choice, I said, arms crossed. Now you get to live with it. Sophia muttered angrily as she dragged the last suitcase to the car. Daniel glared at me, fists clenched, but powerless. There was nothing he could do. They were leaving, and I was staying. I stepped inside my house, finally mine again, and shut the door behind me.